call to order the meeting of the Metropolitan Council Transportation Committee for September 11th, 2023. Our first order of business is approval of the agenda. If there are no changes, we can proceed. Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the August 28th, 2023 Transportation Committee meeting minutes. Did anyone have changes or additions? Seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Vento. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Carter. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And the minutes have been adopted. Now we're on to reports this evening. We've got MTS Services Director, Charles Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, council members. The council continues work with MnDOT regarding the Rethinking I-94 project. Rethinking I-94 is a long-term process to engage communities that live, work, commute, and play along the corridor to promote movement of people and goods and high quality of life for neighboring communities. The geographic area of the project is between the two downtowns, Minneapolis and St. Paul. Councilmember Carter serves on the Policy Advisory Committee, and Chair Zelli is a co-chair of the PAC on this effort. Sharing an update today because there's an upcoming last public meeting related to the project. The project's reached an important milestone this summer in that alternatives have been released for public input. So the alternatives at this stage are a combination of highway and transit ideas that reflect the basic design or number of lanes on the roadway and the type of transit service that could exist. They're high level, meaning more details would be developed as feedback's received and as technical information is gathered. So the upcoming meeting this week builds on virtual meetings held on August 23rd and in-person meetings on August 24th in Minneapolis. And the meeting this week is on Thursday. There's three options, 7:30 to 9:30, 11 to 2:30, and 6 to 7:30 p.m., all at the Rondo Community Library on Dale Street. So attendees are welcome to stop by anytime during those times to view alternatives, speak with MnDOT, ask questions, provide feedback. So this is a bit more hands-on than the virtual meetings have been, where folks can walk around the room at their own pace and learn about the project, learn about the alternatives. There's also a children's activity room on site. MnDOT's promoting these options, also seeks input on the identified alternatives with a survey that's open now, and we can share that out as well. Open through the fall, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to complete. So we're continuing to promote these activities as we pursue the project with MnDOT. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Charles. Questions or comments from council members? Councilmember Carter.
Thank you. Could you just repeat the times?
Sure. So Thursday, September 14th, the three options, 7:30 to 9:30 a.m., 11 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., and 6 to 7:30 p.m.
Okay. There's no questions or comments? All right, thank you. Now we're on, in place of our general manager tonight, we have COO Brian Funk join us.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and council members. Brian Funk filling in for General Manager Canderas, and I'll keep my remarks focused on kind of my areas. So some operational highlights for the group. Last Monday, of course, we completed our state fair service for 2023. We completed that express site service from 4 sites this year instead of 3 that we had done the last 2 years. With nearly 250,000 rides. And so overall service was up about 33% with the addition of that 4th site. Leading the pack was Minnetonka out at County Road 73 and 394, followed by the new site in Blaine, Bloomington, and then Cottage Grove. But each site was very strong. And another highlight was the A-line that had a 50% increase in the estimated rides during the state fair. Team put together a service plan that was focused on frequency and additional capacity on our buses, and we think that that was really successful. So planning's already underway, started with debrief sessions last week, and so we'll be looking ahead to see if we have additional capacity and then make improvements based on customer and employee feedback. And then there's no rest for the weary, and so the state fair is heavily focused in the bus mode, but this last weekend was big for rail operations. Crews completed rail brake repairs on the south end of the Blue Line, And then the first place Twins were back in town, and so we had the Twins playing the Mets. September crowds are big as the Twins start to make their playoff run. The Gopher football team had a home game on Saturday night, and then the Vikings kicked off their 2023 campaign yesterday. And the result inside the stadium wasn't necessarily what the home fans looked like or were looking for, but Metro Transit is still undefeated out on the platforms, and we're able to have post-game operations wrapped up in less than an hour. And so we're take that assignment really seriously, and the team here at Metro Transit did a great job yesterday. And then finally, a couple notes on North Star service. This coming Saturday, we have a full-scale exercise at our Big Lake facility. In this exercise, it's a lot of familiarization for our staff and emergency responders to be able to do this. This is FTA and FRA required drills, and we're really excited for that from about 10 to noon on Saturday. And then later in the middle of October, we'll be doing a similar one on light rail. And then finally, as I think everyone in the group knows, we're looking at expanding our North Star service. And so starting Monday, October 2nd, we'll be effectively doubling the number of offerings, including a third trip in the primary direction, plus our reverse commute trains. And then on October 8th, we'll be serving Vikings games with special event trains for the remainder of the season. And so we'll start to work through that, and we're already starting discussions about 2024 and what the event service looks like there. We know that the Twins have a high interest in us returning those game day trains, and so we'll work on that. And I know our staff is planning for a onboard ride on that Monday morning, riding that flip train, because you can ride that out to Big Lake, get back to Target Field a little bit after 8:30 in the morning. And so we'll send out a notice as well for any council members who may be available and want to join in the fun. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brian, last week I had an opportunity to hear the governor speak, and he was talking about the added security that had occurred during the fair and how it had really benefited the whole event. How about as far as incidents and security with our transit to and from the fair?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Council Member, great question. And so each year we have transit police who work a detail at our state fair site, and then they try to provide roving response to each of the express sites that we're operating. We were able to make it through this year without any noteworthy safety or security incidents. And one of the really nice things is that after some unfortunate events towards the end of last year's state fair, our teams, both from the police side as well as operations, had coordinated efforts for that sort of emergency response planning and what do we do for certain scenarios. And so it was a really good emergency preparedness exercise earlier this summer ahead of the fair. Kind of get everybody on the same page, and as the governor mentioned, was highly successful.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, additional questions or comments? No, thank you, and do send out the info on the North Star trip. So it's because of the reduced operations, a lot of our council members probably haven't had a chance to check it out. So very good. All right, we actually do not have a report tonight from TAAC, so we are moving, and there's no items on consent, so we're moving to non-consent business. Our first business item is business item 2023-174, a joint same week amendment. I'm turning to Charles Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Filling in as Heather Giesel is out today, so happy to present a changed item from what you have actually already passed. So the circumstances are that Ed Petrie and Heather Giesel presented the original Q3 amendment on August 14th. You passed that unanimously. It's since moved on. It would be going to the council this Wednesday for final approval. After the meeting documents were finalized for that presentation, which again occurred roughly a month ago, MTS staff became aware that some pending federal grants would actually be executed either around or shortly after the council final approval. Those grants were not included in the Q3 amendment. We're asking you to add those grants to what the council authorizes now. This would help us avoid delays in procuring buses and delays in passing through some funds to Southwest Transit to actually pursue some electric vehicles that they were awarded by the federal government. So these funds are contingent on, those fully executed grants. Page 11 of the amendment has the details of them, but basically there's 3 projects. One is that low and no emission grant that Southwest received federal competitive funds for, but then also just the big bus and small bus procurements that we pursue at MTS to replace our fleet on an annual basis. So that's the capital side of the amended amendment. On the operating side, the 2023 state transportation bill also requires a study of post-COVID public transit, requires the University of Minnesota to conduct that study in their Center for Transportation Studies with funding from the Met Council. That passed in May. Across the summer, this study has actually been scoped, where now we actually know enough to put a budget number behind it. And so the other part of the amendment today is to add that $150,000 so that that work can progress. This would allow us to stay on track. CTS needs to prepare that report across the next year, and by bringing the amendment forward now, we could execute an agreement with them to pursue the work. Without this modification, we'd probably be looking at either a special one-off amendment or waiting until the carry forward amendment next spring, which is longer than we would recommend waiting. Again, moving forward would allow us to advance these, the agreement with CTS and the vehicle purchases without delay. And so, Madam Chair, the proposed action is that the council authorize the 2023 Unified Budget Amendment as indicated and in accordance with the attached revised tables.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Venta.
My middle name isn't doom and gloom, but you're probably going to think that after I ask this question. There's a lot of expectation that Congress will pass a continuing resolution, hopefully, in order to avoid a government shutdown at the beginning of October. But with that continuing resolution comes a timeline that clicks along pretty fast, and they've got to resolve the budget by the end of this year. And so there's a lot of angst. I am aware that at least a few congressional offices are doing what they can to prepare for the potential of a shutdown because they think that the vibes aren't good about it. And I'm wondering if there's any way, Charles, and maybe Heather and Ed can put together some information for us of knowing kind of what's in the pipeline as it relates to grants and what the impact would be if there was a short-term or even worse, a long-term delay in the receipt of those grants, and if it impacts any of our projects or work in any way.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, Council Member. A good piece of news is that 2 of these grants actually are fully executed at this point.
Good.
So that risk has resolved. In addition to the reasons you mentioned, there's also a number of more bureaucratic reasons that there's motivation to execute grants before the end of the federal fiscal year. So we still do expect that the 3rd grant of these 3 will be executed before September 30th.
Okay, good. And then what about, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, what about with any other projects that we have with federal funds?
Madam Chair, Council Member, with any project, there's risk of, will the funds be there exactly when we need them? Many of the grants for upcoming work have been executed. Any federal shutdown could lead to project delays, but I think folks work pretty actively to mitigate those risks. It's both in terms of issuing grants, but also in terms of other consultation with the FTA as needed for projects. And, ultimately, we do require our federal partners to be up and running to advance some of our work, but there are things we can do in the interim should a shutdown occur.
Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments? Councilmember Chambliss.
Don't have questions or comments. I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Very good. There's a motion to approve business item 2023-174, joint same week as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Carter. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And the motion carries. Thank you, Charles. Now we are on to business item 2023-189, which is Metro Transit Cleaning and Repair Standards, and we have Anna Flintoft here. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Anna Flintoft. My pronouns are she, her, and you can call me Anna. I'm the manager of planning and urban design in Metro Transit's Engineering and Facilities Department, and I'm here to present a business item on cleaning and repair standards. This is related to recent legislation as well as Metro Transit Safety and Security Action Plan. The proposed action that we are requesting is that the Metropolitan Council authorize Metro Transit staff to develop cleaning and repair standards for stations and vehicles as required by Minnesota statutes, section 473.412, including procedures for cleaning at defined minimum intervals, procedures for inspections at defined minimum intervals, methods for timely removal of graffiti and vandalism, methods for timely removal of damages most impactful to the customer experience, and methods to measure and report on cleaning and repair activities. The reason that we are requesting this action at this time is to meet recent legislative requirements to establish cleaning and repair standards by October 1st. The full legislation is attached to this business item, and I'd like to review some key requirements from the legislation. The first is that the legislation requires the council to adopt standards by October 1st, including cleaning requirements for stations and vehicles, a strategy for discovering and removing vandalism and graffiti, and a proposal for timely repair of damage. Second, the legislation requires that the council submit a report to the chairs and ranking minority members of the legislative committees with jurisdiction over transit policy and finance on the cleaning and repair standards by October 1st, including how we develop the standards and the stakeholders consulted, financial resources needed to implement the standards, and a proposed method for soliciting public feedback on cleanliness and the rider experience. And that relates to the third bullet point here, which is that the legislation requires that we post notice on our website and at all LRT and BRT stations by February 1st about how we solicit public feedback on cleanliness and rider experience. And then finally, the legislation requires that every 2 years, starting October 1st, 2025, the council must submit a report on cleanliness and repairs, including the frequency, type, and location of cleaning and repairs, expenditures, and workforce challenges. So to meet these legislative requirements, Metro Transit has convened an internal working group, and we've started a cleaning and repair standards project. The purpose of the project is to develop and implement standards for cleaning and repair of transit vehicles and stations, to develop methods for reporting on implementation progress, to meet the requirements of the new legislation, and to create a coordinated framework for cleaning and repairs across internal departments and across transit modes. So one of the things that we're trying to be very intentional about in this effort is to develop standards that really focus on the customer experience. So we want to center the customer experience and make sure that our maintenance requirements will result in a consistent and high-quality customer experience, regardless of which transit mode customers are using and regardless of which internal maintenance group is responsible for doing cleaning and repairs. Over the last few years, there have been a lot of challenges that have made it difficult to provide the quality of cleanliness and repairs that we want our customers to experience. We've seen an increase in litter, graffiti, broken glass, and biohazards. We've received increased customer complaints about trash, damage, and graffiti at public facilities. We have workforce challenges in filling budgeted positions related to cleaning and repairs. Right now, about a quarter of all of our positions that are directly related to cleaning repairs are vacant. We're working hard to fill these vacancies. And at the same time, our metro system is growing. So over the last couple of years, we've opened Orange Line and we've opened D Line. We've budgeted new positions and we've filled some of them, but not all of them. And we do plan to budget and add more positions for cleaning and repairs as we expand the metro system. So when we add B line, gold line, E line, F line, green line extension, we will be adding more positions. We've also reviewed our existing maintenance practices and procedures and our existing data and reporting capabilities. Some of our maintenance operations have more detailed procedures, and so one opportunity that we have is to update our procedures to create more consistency across our different business units. The chart on the right is an example of one measure that we currently report in the Safety and Security Action Plan related to biohazard cleanup of broken glass, and graffiti removal at public facilities. What this chart doesn't tell us is how long it takes to respond, and so that's the kind of thing that we want to develop through this effort. With the legislature's recent creation of a transit sales tax effective October 1st, we are happy to have the funding stability necessary to invest in improvements to our cleaning and repair activities. With implementation of these standards, we expect to deliver a higher quality, more consistent standard of cleaning and repairs for our customers and for the communities we serve. We will have more clearly defined priorities for cleaning and repair work, and we will be able to more strategically deploy staff and resources to those priorities. This will require resources, which the new sales tax provides. It will require better tracking and reporting of cleaning and repair work, which we intend to invest in. And this will be an iterative process. We expect these standards will need to change and be improved over time as we work on implementation and can better evaluate the outcomes of the new standards. So we have developed an initial set of cleaning and repair standards based upon what we've learned about the customer experience, our current practices and procedures, and the level of service that we're currently providing. So there are four kind of areas of content in these initial standards. The first is cleaning requirements, and this includes both routine cleaning and deep cleaning. Inspections, which is a core maintenance practice that includes both the discovery of cleaning repair issues as well as preventive maintenance. Removal of graffiti and vandalism, and then repair of damages most impactful to the customer experience. And the things we've prioritized here are repair of broken glass, heat and light, damages due to car crashes, and elevator outages. So I just wanted to walk through a few examples of what we are drafting in these initial standards. So one example is routine cleaning of buses. We expect to clean buses daily after buses return to the maintenance facility in preparation for the next service day. And we meet this standard pretty consistently. We do this every day. Second, we expect to clean LRT stations daily. We have a few stations that are cleaned more than once a day, but generally we are meeting this goal of cleaning stations on a daily basis. But however, our methods for reporting on this are not as good as we would like to see, so we don't have a lot of good data on this level of maintenance. The third example is that we expect to deep clean or power wash shelters at least once every 6 months, typically once in the spring and once in the fall, because we can't do power washing in the winter. In the last 6 months, we've power washed about 3/4 of our shelters, according to our work order data. So we are not quite meeting our current goal. And finally, we expect that graffiti will be removed within 7 days of it being discovered or reported to Metro Transit. We remove a lot of graffiti every day through routine cleaning. We also expect to remove some graffiti more quickly if there's offensive content, if it's graffiti that's covering up transit information that customers need to make their trips. We want to remove that within 24 hours. And then finally, graffiti removal is really difficult during the winter. So we don't expect that we're going to be able to provide the same level of service during the winter months. The other element of this project that is critical is measuring and reporting on cleaning and repair activities. We expect to be able to report on the frequency of cleaning, the frequency of inspections, our responsiveness to remove graffiti and vandalism, our responsiveness to repair damages most impactful to the customer experience, and we'll also be keeping track of customer feedback that we're receiving on cleaning and repair issues. To do this, we're going to need better data, better systems to collect that data, and better business processes to act on that data. And one major way that we're modernizing our data and technology systems is implementation of an enterprise asset management system. Our Director of Asset Management, Kristen Thompson, talked about this at the last Transportation Committee meeting. It's going to take a couple of years before we're going to have that system in place. And so in the meantime, we are looking at ways that we can make use of the business applications and data reporting tools that we have to be able to make better decisions. We're also in the process of drafting this report to the legislature that's due October 1st. The contents of that report will include the purpose of the report, the council authorization to develop standards, which is what we're requesting of you today, an overview of the cleaning and repair standards project, customer feedback that we've received on cleaning and repairs, a proposal for soliciting public feedback, financial and staffing resources needed, and then a copy of the initial standards for cleaning and repairs. So in summary, the proposed action that we are requesting is that the Metropolitan Council authorize Metro Transit staff to develop cleaning and repair standards for stations and vehicles as required by Minnesota Statute Section 473.412, including procedures for cleaning at defined minimum intervals, procedures for inspections at defined minimum intervals, methods for timely removal of graffiti and vandalism, methods for timely repair of damages most impactful to the customer experience, and methods to measure and report on cleaning and repair activities. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you for that report, Anna. With the standards that we have are being proposed for reporting and implementation, and the reporting being required every 2 years, are we thinking of having reporting to the Met Council more frequently than that? Because I know that different assets are going to require, different frequency for the repairs and the cleaning. So I'm just wondering, with this proposal going back to the state legislature in just a couple of weeks, have we thought about what those defined minimum intervals are and for which assets? And then how have we thought about what reporting should come to the Met Council on how we're doing against these standards?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair and Councilmember Chambliss. We have drafted initial standards that we plan to include in the report to the legislature on October 1st. We expect these standards may need to change over time. I would say that we haven't decided if, how often we would be providing updates to the Metropolitan Council, but that's certainly something that we can discuss.
Okay,
Councilmember Chambliss.
thank you. And then just one more question. As we think about reporting back to the Met Council, how effective is Met Council expecting to be against these state legislative requirements to set the standards? If we have standards and we meet those standards, and we want to make sure that we're having a positive impact on the perception of the customer experience, then we may need to go beyond, those minimum intervals and those minimum standards. So what is the plan to achieve effectiveness against creating a more positive customer experience beyond this new legislative requirement for reporting and setting those standards?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Councilmember Chambliss, our intention here is to deliver a higher level of cleaning repair than we have been able to provide over the last few years with our constrained resources and constrained staffing. We do expect that we are going to be constantly evaluating what standards we are setting, how we are deploying staff to meet those standards. I think that we have an example in our bus maintenance department where they've started a pilot program of kind of evaluating the cleanliness of buses. And that's the kind of thing that I think that we could apply more widely to really evaluate the cleanliness, the quality of cleanliness in our system.
Sure. I see you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Council Member, and to build on Anna's point, we're viewing this as well as not something that we do in isolation. This is really part of that overall customer experience. And so our belief is that as we continue to make strides and advance the Safety and Security Action Plan and have a system that's more usable and a better experience overall, it'll lend itself to a system that is cleaner. And so we're part of fitting that in, with that overall bigger picture. And so we are committed to certainly pushing ourselves and then asking for additional resources. And the nice thing is that as we continue to move forward each year when we're setting up budget planning and using the tools and the information that we're gathering, it allows our teams really to be able to identify what are the gaps, what are we hearing from our customers, where should we make improvements, what areas maybe have we tackled that are not needing quite the level of attention. And so we're excited about that iterative process with some really strong parameters.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Carter? And
Thank you. This just seems like a good thing to do for us, to be mindful in this way, not only for the legislators' purposes, but for our own, and in line with the customer experience work that is being done. I do see here the plan to address customer feedback on issues. I have to assume that this would be not simply on issues, but to have that customer feedback or some kind of customer assessment of cleanliness on somewhat of a regular project overtime basis would be a part of this plan as well. And hopefully, this is a question, the business process improvements that resources are needed for would include those communication processes that engage broader feedback, more regular feedback, not only on problems and concerns, but also on the status of cleanliness on our system. Would that be true?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Councilmember Carter, I would say there's two kind of things there. One is responding to issues that are reported by customers and by employees. We want to streamline those processes so that we can track when we're receiving those issues and track how we're resolving them, so we're resolving them in a timely manner. I think the other thing that you're talking about is kind of evaluating our customers' perceptions of cleanliness and repair overall. And that it is something that we, as part of this kind of overall customer experience effort at Metro Transit, we are working with our Strategic Initiatives Department to think about how do we measure that customers' perceptions over time, and if we are, making a difference in how customers perceive cleanliness and repairs, and how that impacts their overall experience.
Part and parcel, thank you.
And just a quick comment before, I would assume one of the tools is we have an annual transit onboard survey that we do reach out to customers, and I would think that, this is probably something that could be really well included with that at some level. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to do a shout out to our employees who do this work. Year and a half ago on Met Transit Operator Appreciation Day, I did the early morning shift in downtown St. Paul, and it happened to be the day after St. Patrick's Day was celebrated in St. Paul, and there was quite a bit of cleanup that was needed at that particular stop. And to be doing that kind of work at 5 o'clock in the morning can't be easy. And not every day is St. Patrick's Day, thank God. But that work is really, really hard. So I hope that this isn't part of the legislation, but I think it should be part of our organization's priorities. I hope we're letting those folks know how deeply they're appreciated, both as a retention, but also just a simple thank you, and making those jobs as rewarding as they can be, because it's grueling work. I have one weird question, and this may not be something that can be answered tonight, and that's totally fine. But do we tend to find that the bus mode is less in need of maintenance than the LRT or vice versa? And/or their stations?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Vento, I don't know if Brian can maybe, I think we do, the light rail stations are more infrastructure, more ridership, so we do see a lot of maintenance requirements at those locations. I don't know, Brian, if you have any other observations.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Council Member, I think that wouldn't be able to cite the numbers, but I believe that a lot of it really depends on what the foot traffic is like, what that use is like. And some of it is location-based, and a number of feet through that may not even be there intending to use transit, but, are there and then move along eventually. And so it's something that we expect to know a lot more about as we're gathering and improving that data collection. Right now, certainly our teams, and back to the comment about recognition, Marilyn Porter, our director, is in the audience for the public facility workers and facilities technicians, and she does a terrific job of recognizing them on a regular basis. But they really know the system, and so we'll be harnessing, what they know about it as well, because they're, as you indicated, the ones who are out at, 4 or 5 in the morning to get started, and they know really well where they need to be, and so how we can build that into our workflow is really critical.
Madam Chair, I'd also be interested in knowing whether seasons impact the degree to which our teams have to really pull out the stops to keep things clean and safe.
Madam Chair and Council Member, we can see what we have for some data on that right now to look at seasonality. And one thing, since we have a number of the directors in the audience, I'll mention Carlos Canchola. He's our Director of Rail Systems Maintenance. And one of the challenges he faces is keeping the track bed clear on the rail system. And that has, of course, in the winter, the constant snow falling on top of, and then hardening into ice, and then melting, and how quickly the teams are able to respond. And so I would say that, there's a high degree of spring cleaning efforts that go in all areas, in particular along the rail network, just because getting access to things that are buried under the ice and snow is next to impossible much of the winter.
Thank you.
Okay, additional questions or comments? I have a couple of quick questions. So, for things, obviously, we get things that get reported, but then, there's also things that maybe don't reach a threshold that someone feels they need to call or reported. Are we doing additional training with operators or other people, like what will be our trip personnel and some of that, to make sure that they're doing some of the reporting, so that we can be a little more on, be very on top of things, because we know that you can have everything clean and then something can happen, and so that's, are we building this practice in there for that somehow?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think that's a great point. We have hundreds of staff out in the system every day, and it's not just the staff that are responsible for doing the cleaning repairs, but we have rail supervisors inspecting stations, and we have street supervisors checking out bus facilities. So I think that the more that we can streamline our processes and train our staff to be able to easily report these issues, the more quickly we can react.
That's great. My other question has to do with workforce, and I know that this is going to take more people. You're already down 25%. Are you working with HR or different people? You've had some great unique strategies to hire more operators. Are we already trying to do some of that for this effort?
Yeah, Madam Chair, we are. Some positions already have hiring bonuses, but we're continuing to talk to our HR department about, evaluating the attractiveness of those positions if we have those classified correctly, and looking at hiring bonuses as well.
Thank you. All right, final call. Any other questions? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-189.
Move the motion.
Moved by Councilmember Carter, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Vento. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and motion carries. Thank you very much. Now we're on to business item 2023-202, a same week item. It's for the Blue Line Enhancements, and we have Ryan Heath here to present.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. My name is Ryan Heath. I'm a Senior Project Coordinator with Engineering and Facilities. My pronouns are he, him, and you may call me Ryan. This is the Blue Line Enhancements Phase 2B project. And the proposed action today is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the Regional Administrator to award and execute Contract 23P039 with Railworks Track Systems for replacement track, rail, and upgrades and replacement of signal components on the Metro Blue Line in an amount not to exceed $18,640,000. The Blue Line Enhancements Program is a state of good repair program for our Blue Line light rail line. It is now approaching 20 years old, and we're beginning to see some of that age on our system. For example, we have worn rail. For the 2B project, we have some grade crossings where the roadway crosses light rail tracks. That results in corrosion and rusting of the rail. And so maybe we get a shorter lifespan than other locations. It's time to replace that rail. We have an obsolete signal system. A lot of the equipment we can no longer purchase from the manufacturers at this time. And we also have elements such as incandescent signals, and it's time to upgrade those, replace those, and install LED signals. And then we have other elements of the light rail system that aren't compliant with our current standards and practices. For example, at pedestrian crossings, which we have quite a few of, the warning devices that are used on the Blue Line are not up to the standards that we used on the Central Corridor project and now Southwest. The phases of this program, phase 1 was downtown Minneapolis. This was 2016 and 2017 leading up to the Super Bowl. Phase 2A was last year. This was MOA station to BCS station in Bloomington. The current action today is for phase 2B. This is from the BCS station to the Terminal 2 station. And that will be this year continuing through part of 2025. And then the final phase of this program will be phase 3, and that is the Terminal 2 station through the Cedar Riverside station. We'll be looking to bid that in 2024 for construction and complete it in 2026. We've had a very challenging bidding environment for many projects, but especially I would say light rail and rail in general. It's a very specialized field, and so there are relatively few contractors who can complete the work. Metro Transit itself is very busy with rail work, and so a lot of our local contractors are already occupied with those tasks, but the entire industry is very busy. And so for these larger light rail projects, we're starting to approach bidding, going a little bit above and beyond some of the normal practices we would use maybe for a little more straightforward project. For this project, we used a 10-week bid period rather than a 4-week bid period. So we let it on June 6th, and then we received bids on August 15th. And that gives bidders time to really dig into the numbers and put together what is a really complex technical bid. We did a lot of market research ahead of time to identify potential bidders, subcontractors, and suppliers, and that resulted in 37 plan holders, 10 of whom identified as minority women, veterans, small or disadvantaged business enterprises. And then we held a pre-bid meeting and multiple in-person site visits to give those bidders opportunities to come to our site, see the work that we need to do in the environment that it'll be in. And this is important because we have many out-of-town bidders who may not be able to show up for a single meeting or a single time slot. And so the results of the bid, we received 2 bids, and we are very satisfied with these 2 bids. A lot of projects in the industry right now are receiving single bids, which of course is not desirable. And so we had a low bid of the $18,640,000, and we had a second low bid of $18,646,249. And those numbers are very close together, and I think that gives us high confidence in those numbers. and also is reflective of some of the extra work we did with procurement during the bidding phase. One thing I will point out is that we did have bid alternates in this package, and the reason we included alternates is because of the budgeting considerations. We had portions of the scope that were desirable to complete, but maybe not strictly essential from an immediate need. And so we chose to receive bids that included the alternates, and if our base bid had exceeded our budget, that gives us the opportunity to proceed forward with the project in certain scenarios without awarding those alternates. In this case, we did have enough budget to award the base bid and the bid alternates, and we're very happy to be able to proceed with the entire project. And so to recap, the proposed action today is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to award and execute the contract 23P039 with Railworks Track Systems for the replacement track, rail, and upgrades and replacement of signal system components on the Metro Blue Line in an amount not to exceed $18,640,000. With that, I'm open for questions.
Thank you. The bids are amazing. I've been doing this a long time. I've never seen anything that close. So that's amazing. It really shows that, yeah, the consistency of information, both of what went out from us and what was received was really amazing. That's really good. Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you. Yes, it was nice to see those bids, so you can focus on the other aspects in terms of awarding the contracts. It's really nice to be able to sit here and almost 20 years later after the construction and my first tour of the proposed, Blue Line, actually come to the point where we're working on, making sure that we maintain a high-class quality system that is growing. So kudos to Met Council and all the people that preceded us. And I'm looking forward to being able to make sure that everything that we build in terms of our light rail projects are high quality, and that maintenance is so crucial to making sure that we keep it that way.
Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ryan, do you know if we have done work with Railworks Track Systems before?
Madam Chair, Council Member, yes, we have done quite a bit of work with Railworks Track Systems. They have a local office in Lakeville.
Okay.
An example project is we actually did a state of good repair just outside the building at the interchange this year, and they were the prime contractor.
So we've had a good relationship and good.
And we have high confidence in their ability to perform.
Great.
Any additional questions or comments? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-202, same week.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Pacheco. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Chambliss. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that concludes our business for the evening. Items 1 and 3 are same week, so we'll be at the council on the non-consent agenda. And I think we probably do want to take forward the cleaning and repair standards to the full council. I think they'd like to hear about it. Okay. All right, now we're on to information, and the first information item is proposed Metropolitan Council Triennial FTA DB Eagle, and we have Ashanti Payne.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Council and committee members. Ashanti Payne, Assistant Director in the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity, and I am here today to talk about our goal-setting methodology for our FTA Triennial DBE goal. So just as a little bit of background, as a recipient of federal funds through USDOT and FTA, the DBE program is operated by the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity on behalf of the federal government. Each recipient of USDOT funding is responsible for setting an overall program goal every 3 years. Overall goal represents the anticipated DBE participation over a 3-year period and set every 3 years. And it's important to point this out that overall goals are not a quota and that they are goals, but are goals to be used as a floor and not a ceiling. In terms of how we go about meeting each year, our overall goal, there has to be a certain portion that is designated as race and gender neutral, meaning that a portion has to be part of your goal that isn't consciously part of your goal-setting process. And we set project goals on specific projects based on the scope of work and availability of DBEs in those scopes to perform on that contract. There are often times when we either set a goal and the goal is exceeded, and that amount that exceeds the goal that we consciously set is called race and gender neutral portion. Or when we don't set a goal on a project and we still get DBE participation, that is also considered what we call race and gender neutral participation. And race conscious portion is the portion that we specifically set and review and have a numeric goal. I just went through this, how we set project-specific goals, and just a project goal will be rarely equivalent to our overall goal just because it's specific to the specifics of that project. This is actually a picture of one of our light rail transit unit staff and an intern that we had working out doing some commercially useful function reviews on our light rail transit projects. Our current triennial DBE goal is 14%. And as we mentioned, goal achievement is based on awarded contracts. And just as a kind of a point of reference, this is what our achievement has been the last few years. 2021, we just barely made it, 14.02%. 2022, from what I've been told, that was the highest achievement in our program that we've had. And then the first half of the year of 2023 was our lowest. We had 6.5%. So we're looking to make up that in this second half report. Also, just so that you're aware of what happens if we didn't achieve our goal, we are required to do a shortfall analysis and present that for approval to FTA. It's not a fun exercise, so I'm glad that is, well, we plan on exceeding our goal so that we don't have to do that. But if we didn't, that would be the process. So what has been proposed for FTA goal for the next 3 years is 13.4%, which 11% of that would be race conscious, and then 2.4% race neutral for that total of 13.4%. So the methodology defined. We determine the availability. Again, I should mention that this year, also for the first time in our council's history, we used an outside consultant to do our methodology for us. And we contracted with the University of Minnesota Roy Wilkins Center and Dr. Myers and his team. There's several reasons why we did that. One, the level of objectivity and transparency provided. We've also received some feedback from our vendor community, as well as the Equity Advisory Committee, that this is a best practice to have a third party assess that. And then also, it's been my experience, when you use the most simple method that we did, the DBE vendor method, it is, you're basically counting what you're doing in your program. So we made that decision. for those reasons. The methodology that the University of Minnesota uses is they use 5 legally defensible methods as opposed to the 1. And that is the bidders list, vendors list, DB method, Dun and Bradstreet method, and the annual business survey. But you're also required to define your geographic market area and then produce any adjustments to the base goal. And then, as we mentioned before, you must propose a maximum proportion that is achievable through race and gender neutral means. So the base goal, our base goal was 9.6%. And then if you see on that next line where it says adjustment to the base goal, that is what we call the but-for adjustment. So you look at any differences in awards that can't be attributed, well, anything that can't be attributed to differences in the industry, location, firm size, credit risk, or other characteristics of a DB versus non-DB contracts. So that's called the but-for discrimination, anything that can't be explained by industry factors. And that percentage is 39.9%. We also look at historically and project out what portion that we can achieve through race neutral means. And so 18.2% is that calculation and that number versus the race and gender neutral means, which is 2.4%. I'm sorry, that's the end calculation. And then 81.8% of that complete goal will be achieved through race conscious portions, and that equals 11%. Just also what we asked the University of Minnesota to do is, okay, tell us if we used our own method, what would have our base goal and goal would have been moving forward. We would have had a much lower base goal would have been at 4.58%. And some may even look at that 9.6% and overall 13.4% as low, given our past achievement. There are some contributing factors to that. Mainly, the major large capital projects are not included in this calculation because they will not be awarded within this 3-year period. So that would be Purple Line and Blue Line Extension, all scheduled to be awarded in 2027. Additionally, 61% of our projected expenditures are in the category of transit operation services, and we do not have any Minnesota-based DBEs that perform that work. However, we did find 3 DBEs in our directory that have gone through the process of seeking certification in our region that are from outstate but have not bid to us. So there is some opportunity there as well to do some outreach and some capacity building. So we are currently in a 30-day public comment period, which is also required. It started on August 28th. Myself and Dr. Myers will be presenting to Management Committee this week. There's also a virtual public comment meeting to be held via Teams on September 14th. And Dr. Myers will be presenting to the EAC, the Equity Advisory Committee, on September 19th. And then the goal will be brought back to Management Committee and full council meeting on October 25th for approval. This is one of those items that does require council approval to move forward, and we will be submitting upon approval to FTA in November. So these dates are also important please pass along to your constituents and folks that would like to comment. We are receiving written comment as well. If they're unavailable to check into any of these sessions, there's process provided to submit written comment. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and I can take any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Carter.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the information, all of the percentages of percentages. I know it takes quite a bit to design these, and I am certain that you've received a lot of help from experts in the area to get to the recommended goal. I heard you say that one of the reasons, although the goal that's being proposed this year is lower than it has been in the past, one of the reasons is because of the large projects that are outside of the 3-year horizon. And let me just understand that this is the FTA goal for projects that we're doing with FTA. Although those projects do not fall within the 3-year period of time, that goal is about those projects that do. It would be what percentage of that work would be awarded to DBEs. Is that not correct? And the reason I ask that is because I'm not sure, because that work isn't included in this time period, that I understand why it would impact that availability unless it's about geography, and it probably is. I'm talking myself into what it's about. Could you be clear on that for me, however, so that I understand it better?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Carter, yes, I believe I understand your question, and probably a better way to say it was the second part of what I said. But you are correct that what is included in this methodology is our projected expenditures over the next 3 years. And one of the reasons why this number was lower than it is in previously, or I should say the main reason, is that 61% of those projected expenditures are in a category where there are no certified DBs in Minnesota. And yes, large capital projects tend to have a bigger impact on DB participation. It provides more opportunity. As we see with the Green Line extension, where we're meeting 22% DBE in our achievement, there are no projects similar to that are going to be in this next 3 years that would have been included in this methodology. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you talked me through it. I do appreciate that. And I know that as we do these projects, we have opportunity to prepare prospective contractors for the what's coming. So we're creating pipeline. That is to say, we've created pipeline then for certain elements or certain types of work that will be most likely then on those large projects, and not necessarily for the types of work that would be available on the other projects. And I would, not today, but in the future, appreciate additional information on what we are seeing in terms of the kinds of work that draws that greater DB participation, and perhaps what we're gleaning in terms of the work that we need to do to prepare additional categories so that we are able to increase that uptake in future smaller, not large projects. Am I communicating what I need?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Carter, if I understand you correctly, you would like to see more information on the types of projects that lead to greater participation from DBEs and where we have a strong pipeline or pool of available DBEs to participate. And then in addition with that, what are the efforts that are ongoing, in place, or on the horizon to build capacity where we have gaps in opportunities?
Thank you. Did a much better job of that than I did, and yes, I appreciate gaining that information.
I'd also point out to the management committee, quarterly, we get quarterly procurement reports, and includes a more deeper analysis of council-wide, some of the DBE and MNCOG use, and both for goods and services, and takes a little deeper dive on that. And I think, because Ashanti mentioned, sometimes these big projects can make numbers do different things. But if you look at what we're doing overall, I think that's a great snapshot, and I can get you a link for our most recent one, and you can see if there's other information besides that we want in that, yeah. So,
It's good information.
yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
very good. Okay, additional questions or comments? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thanks.
All right, next we are on to our transportation needs assessments, and we have Jonathan Ehrlich.
Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Ehrlich. I'm a senior manager of transportation research at Metropolitan Transportation Services. And I'm here with my colleagues.
Good evening, I'm Heidi Schauberg. I'm a planning analyst at MTS.
Good evening, I'm Charles Gorgantla. I'm a senior data scientist with MTS.
Who will be participating in this presentation. And we're very excited to bring to you preliminary research and findings from our transportation needs in daily life study, which is what we've renamed informally the study that that we're bringing to you as we went about it. Transportation planning at the regional level is rooted in data and modeling. Large regional and national household surveys that we participate in and do and I manage collect data on the general population to explain how many trips are made, where they start, where they end, and what purpose they serve. Equipped with this information, agencies build models that represent the population's revealed travel preferences, and we have such models, and we'll talk about them at other times. And if agencies aim to uphold our status quo, household travel surveys entirely help them achieve that goal. But for many individuals, the status quo is not working. Transportation systems in the U.S. have been built on a history of injustice and racial and economic segregation. Many communities have been left out of transportation planning conversations and priorities, and the transportation system as it exists today does not meet their needs. Revealed preference data and surveys cannot tell us about the types of trips people are unable to make, and more importantly, the impact of those missing trips, missed medical appointments, lost job opportunities, deferred educational pursuits, and frayed social networks have on their lives. We struggle to achieve adequate sample sizes to describe the general population, let alone understand nuanced within-group patterns for underrepresented groups. And quantitative and survey data cannot fully give us a robust understanding of the underlying values, beliefs, preferences, and constraints that influence people's travel decisions. So the purpose of our study here is to go beyond that. In planning for a more inclusive and responsive system, we want to understand why and how residents of the region travel in their daily lives and understand both how our transportation system works for the people who live here and how it doesn't work for the people who live here. To collect qualitative data about how people travel using focus groups and supplement the questions that we typically ask to really get at the barriers that people experience and the role that transportation has in their lives. And we also want to, in doing so, focus on the people who are most often left out of traditional quantitative surveys. So our overall approach has been conversation-based. We'll use small group discussions and focus groups also in this presentation synonymously. Small group discussions with residents. We worked with community-based organizations and community partners to identify and organize participants around the region, organizing people into groups based on common identities to increase openness and willingness to share, and holding discussions around the region, the places that are convenient to work well for people. Asking a broad set of questions about people's attitudes and perceptions and the place that transportation has in their lives, not trying to get answers to specific questions, but to really encourage storytelling, and through that storytelling elicit information that we can then understand and use to understand how transportation does and doesn't work in people's lives. And of course, compensated both individuals who participated and the community organizations who assisted us in their research for their time and their expertise. So where we are in the study now is we've completed a set of several dozen focus groups and are presenting some of our initial analysis. We're also in the process of bringing this initial analysis back to those focus groups to ensure that what we heard from those focus groups is what they intended to tell us, and to circle back and to validate the findings of our research. And we're going to present to you a selection of what we consider to be compelling findings here, and we're going to present and publish a more complete report as a document and on our website over later in the fall, partially for brevity's sake, unless you wanted to listen to us talk about findings for 6 or 7 hours, but also a selection that we thought were some of the most compelling. What we did is we applied to the transcripts, getting back to the methodology that we used, we went to our focus groups and took all the transcripts that we had and analyzed them and applied what's called thematic coding to those transcripts of the focus groups we conducted. Thematic coding is a common method in qualitative transportation research and helps us identify patterns through the data. We developed an initial coding schema based on what we know our study goals were and the questions that we asked people. And then as we continued to go through the process, we added, and more themes and concepts emerged from the data, we added additional codes and did more grouping and organizing to better match the data. And at the end of our data collection and analysis period, we essentially stopped hearing new information. We heard many of the same stories and the same findings over and over again along consistent patterns and themes, and that's the way in research like this we know we're done. So just an overview of the groups that we went to, just to show the breadth that we organized. We did 29 focus groups across the region, and really tried to focus on talking to people and groups who have had the hardest time, both getting where they need to go and being represented in the traditional planning process. So this presents an overview of the demographics of the respondents, and we think that we've succeeded in that task. So we're going to begin with a really representative and powerful story that we heard from one individual. Let's call this individual Jay.
I live here in Hastings, but I've also lived in St. Paul. It is myself and my 9-year-old son. We actually have been technically homeless this last year. I'm used to having my own place in a vehicle. I used public transportation in the past, which had both good and bad experiences, both single and with my child. But I'm used to driving myself. This year I have not had a car, and being down the river, there's no transportation options. It makes it extremely difficult to get him to appointments or to get grocery shopping even, just simple paths. We walk everywhere, and with it being winter, it's definitely difficult. So I lived in St. Paul for that reason, because at least we could jump on the bus or a train and get where we need to go. But down here, you're in trouble because you do not have any options unless you want to pay for Smart Ride. Right now, as far as transportation goes, nothing is going well, me or my child. We have important things lined up to get housing. There are intake appointments for that I can't get to. I can't get to probation meetings at the courthouse. There's important meetings that need to be met that I can't get to with the cold. Other times, when it's nice, I can bike or walk. My son is right along with me. He loves it. But when it's cold like this, I have health issues, and it makes it almost impossible to make it to appointments that aren't necessity appointments. Hastings Family Service has a lot of events. There's a lot that me and my son miss because of transportation. So aside from just the medical thing, socially there's a lot that gets missed from lack of transportation. And there's also a lot of essential, non-medical, that get missed because of lack of transportation.
The stories we heard are often challenging to hear, but illuminate the complicated decisions people must make every day. And they're vital for professionals in our field to hear because they so often center experiences that transportation professionals don't necessarily experience in our own lives. We'll hear a number of challenging stories, and some of the contours of these stories are in fact well known, and as we go through them, I do want to acknowledge the work that the council and others are already and may already be doing to respond to some of those issues, but the issues are indeed real and what we're hearing. I also want to cast this as we're thinking about it in the work that we're doing as part of the transportation policy plan development. Although this research is independent, we're going to be using the findings and the stories that we hear to illustrate both the content and the need for the objectives and policies in the TPP. So this story really illustrates the need for the objective in our draft, in the emerging TPP, that our communities are healthy and safe. People are better connected by transportation to community and cultural resources that support their physical, emotional, and mental well-being. And people can better meet their daily needs using affordable travel options beyond driving alone and with fewer barriers. Before we go on to some specific findings, I also just want to reemphasize that the language and the specifics of these narratives and these stories are so important for us to understand what the consequences of lack of access to the transportation system is, and that's so eloquently told in this narrative. And this is just one of many narratives that we could have chosen to illustrate this, and we heard these same things over and over again. So with that, I'm going to go on to our first finding, and it really illustrates not so much policy, but language, how we talk about people and how we understand what they mean, and principally how the language that transportation professionals use is sometimes disconnected from the language that's used from the language that people outside the profession use. So to start off, let's hear from a focus group for Latino caregivers in Ramsey County.
We have lived here 22 years. It is also difficult for us to transport ourselves because there is no bus. Right now, I work in Hugo, and my son is the one bringing me and picking me up. Sometimes he says, "Why me again?" I say, "Well, you're the driver."
So we use in the profession the terms transit dependent and transit reliant as terms for people who don't have reliable access to automobiles or to reliable transportation. But that nomenclature is imprecise in several ways. First, it reduces credit that ought to be ascribed to people's complex and deep support networks. Second, it oversimplifies what is both a complex challenge for participants and a modeling input for those who measure travel demand. And third, the term that indicates that people labeled as transit dependent are actually depending on transit for travel, when in reality the transit service doesn't necessarily meet their travel needs, and they are in fact depending on a much wider net and web of travel services to meet their needs. Finding number 2, people's fears about interpersonal violence while traveling include police officers, especially when using transit. So let's hear from a focus group from African youth in Hennepin County.
We talk about this. When we come out of school, cops are always by the train station. They know we lose our ID or bus pass, and they take that seriously, to a point where even people end up getting tickets in court and have to do community service or in juvenile detention. If we ride for free, it doesn't affect the city budget. So for them to use that as a prison pipeline, especially when students are coming out of school, that has been our focus for years now.
A notable number of stories from our focus group detailed violence while traveling. Their stories of experiencing violence, abuse, and racial profiling from officers while in transit were profound. These concerns are real and severe. People with options can tailor their travel to avoid interaction with police, and people without options find themselves in uncomfortable or unsafe situations because of them. We recognize this is not a new finding per se. Communities of color have been sounding the alarm about police violence for decades and longer, but these findings are only now being widely recognized and institutionalized into transportation planning and policy decisions. And our expectation in the emerging transportation policy plan is to recognize that specifically with objectives around people feeling both more safer and more comfortable and more welcome on all forms of transportation, as well as a significant new objective of reducing disparate impacts, harms, and injustices to Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color, and repairing and eliminating those impacts. Our third finding, also relating to violence. Let's hear from a focus group for Latino caregivers in Ramsey County.
Sometimes I'm very isolated, vulnerable, because I'm Hispanic. We get scared because we get attacked for being Hispanic. We are hit for being Hispanic. I feel like it isn't safe. Just because someone looks Hispanic, people want to rob them, hit them, humiliate them, mistreat them. So a lot of people are afraid of using public transportation for the fear of being attacked. Because of so many things that have happened these days, these years, everything that happened with a certain person, I feel like it would scare them.
During our focus groups, participants shared stories of witnessing or experiencing violence on transit or while they were walking, which discouraged them from taking transit or walking in the future. Even people's experience with verbal and physical violence unrelated to transportation influence their travel choices. They may seek out modes of transportation they perceive as safer, as they often feel that they're on high alert frequently while they're traveling. These stories came up more often in focus groups with Black, Brown, or housing insecure people. The participants speaking in this quote described being targeted for being Hispanic. Our fourth finding relates to violence and also relates to violence and safety while in transport. Let's hear from a focus group for Lao adults conducted in Hennepin County.
I'm content with just being at home. I would like to catch a bus to go downtown to Target and see the new Dayton, but I would go visit my daughter and go to bingo if I had a car. But I would not want to drive to bingo because I'm fearful of road rage. Freeways are crowded.
Fear of being struck while walking or biking stopped people from using these modes or allowing their children to walk or bike. Weather-related risks also constrain people's options and decisions. Snowplows clear the roads for driving while blocking corners for people walking, rolling, or trying to access the bus. And icy or unshoveled sidewalks increase the risk of falling. Extreme heat and extreme cold alike create danger for people if their modes of travel left them exposed to the elements, especially for older adults. One person struggled to choose between staying on the bus and facing an unsafe passenger or getting off the bus and having to wait 45 minutes in sub-zero temperatures for the next one, an unacceptable choice for any traveler to need to make. While perceptions of safety influencing travel behavior are not new findings in and of themselves, this work collectively indicates the immense toll that safety and security-related concerns have on those who are traveling. In addition to the general stress caused by those fears, people often must make painful trade-offs to meet their daily needs, often choosing between current pain and opportunities for future pain. This is the kind of thing that we are going to try to respond in the transportation policy plan to in a number of ways and to illustrate the objective around making sure that people are better connected by transportation to community and cultural resources that support their physical, emotional, and mental well-being. Another finding relating to safety and security while travel and the way that it influences people's travel choices. Let's hear from a focus group for women experiencing housing security in Ramsey County.
I feel like as women, we live with that every day, despite any transportation method we use. You're just situationally aware. Like, this is coming up right behind me, or, he's following me, or are they following me? I don't want nobody knowing where I live. I'll even go a different way. I'll go around the block. Like, is he still following me?
The fears mentioned in the previous findings appear to be nearly universal, although the specifics of these fears differ by population. People talk about safety and security with each other, and they make decisions based on other people's experiences or perceptions they've heard, especially related to safety on transit or the decisions or when to travel to downtowns. Fear for people's safety leads to constant vigilance about people's surroundings while traveling, worry about decisions and options loved ones make when traveling, and even potentially isolation and unmet travel needs when safety and security fears stop people from traveling. The mental load and trauma people carry around safety and security are significant, and the burden of this fear is inequitably distributed throughout the region. Black and brown participants, women, LGBTQ plus participants, and participants experiencing housing insecurity all express fears based on personal trauma or violence that had happened to them or people in their community. People's relationships with their drivers and operators, including transit and ride-hailing, are vital factors in transportation satisfaction, including their feelings of safety. Let's hear from a focus group for people without reliable transportation in Dakota County.
We definitely need to retain people to have compassion and patience. Definitely have something in town that is personal and affordable for everybody. I wanted to cuss for a second, but I had to stop myself. Be patient with vulnerable adults, children, people. Just be kind. You don't know what kind of day people are having. Dispatchers give my child who has a disability attitude.
Stories about relationship with professional drivers were common during transit-centered focus groups, and we heard them both relating to transit, to paratransit, as well as to Uber and Lyft and taxis. These kinds of stories were widely shared, and they substantially impact riders' experiences of travel, both positively and negatively. This is especially true for people who have a disability and their caregivers, older adults, people of color, who frequently reported negative and often stigmatizing behavior from drivers. This relationship can either reinforce or undermine people's sense of dignity and connection to the system and to their community. A last finding relating to safety. Let's hear from a focus group for Latino caregivers in Ramsey County.
Previously, I didn't drive. I had panic attacks, okay? I would get stressed in my shoulders and my head. After 3 years, I started driving, but I wouldn't drive far because I crashed on the freeway. I would think to myself, how am I going to get to work? How am I going to get to work? This was an enormous stress for me, truly. The truth is that I was losing sleep over it.
Traffic safety is oftentimes at the top of mind for vulnerable road users, people who walk and bike. But we also heard about traffic safety concerns from drivers. Drivers experience anxiety, especially in high-speed environments. Several participants mentioned avoiding freeways and highways, which limits their capacity to travel and meet their daily needs. This finding may be counterintuitive, especially for transportation planners and engineers, as statistically speaking, well-designed, limited-access highways and freeways are safer than arterials with at-grade intersections. But if a crash does occur at high speeds, the outcome is oftentimes severe and people are sensitive to those risks. Highways have long been barriers for people who walk, bike, and roll, and this finding suggests that they can be significant barriers for drivers as well. Our last finding for today relates to health. Let's hear from a person who is transit dependent, using that language imprecisely from Scott County.
I have some medical problems and I cannot walk for that long. So I have to have a car for transportation to the doctor, groceries, church. I have to have a car. I have 2 growing children. Thank God they're not little, but my son isn't easy when you have to keep asking for rides. I don't want to be a burden on friends or family. It's expensive to not have a car. I don't know what I would do to get far away. I'm on Social Security. My money would disappear in transportation.
We heard many narratives over the course of looking into our focus groups that really spoke to the complex and interdependent relationship between health and transportation, both the ways that the need to access healthcare influences what drives people to travel, the limitations imposed by medical conditions and health that limit people's health choices, and the fundamental interdependency between people's options and their health and their ability to access healthcare. This is something that really stood out in so many of the focus groups that we had, and something that really begs us to delve deeper into and do further research and further policy making around. Just to summarize overall what we're finding right now, one is we found that this process and this study overall has been very successful, both in that meeting people where they are where they are and meeting them through organizations that they trust and working collaboratively with them is a format that people like. We had people were really excited to participate. We had very positive interactions with people about the study, regardless of their interactions with the transportation system. And the format itself worked very well. At the same time, we do realize that many of our key identity groups not continue to be, simply are not easy for us to reach, in part because many of our community organizations continue to, at this time, be stretched thin, and as a result, difficult for them to find time and difficult for them to find space to cooperate with us. And we are incredibly thankful for the people who were able to do so and the organizations that were able to do so. But it underscores the fact that coordinating large numbers of focus groups is a both time and labor-intensive task that we need to both acknowledge and not stop us from doing this really critical work. We also heard a plea in many different ways, and I'm going to close our presentation with this, that the stories we heard are often challenging to hear, but illuminate the complicated decisions that people are making, and people who talk to us are expecting that we're going to hear them and that action will come from that. And so let's hear from a Native American woman in Hennepin County to close.
Can I ask you a question? Why are you asking about our identity? How are you going to use this question? So once they find out all that information, are they going to make changes? I appreciate you telling me that, but I'm going to be honest. I feel like even telling my story and sharing my reality, nothing's going to come of it. I hope we are actually being heard, not being overlooked.
With that, I'm happy to stand for any questions. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you to all of you. Questions and comments from council members. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the second opportunity I've had to hear this, and each time I'm blown away, and in particular, I'm blown away by the call to action. I think it's really an important message for all of us as council members to hear. Back on slide 7, where you have the demographics, the one demographic that I think is missing, and I would ask maybe in future presentations if it's possible to include, that would be age. I'm curious as to where the age factor falls into it, both from the young and the not so young, and then those of us that are definitely not young anymore. I think that would be a helpful demographic to have. And with that, I just want to say thank you. This is great insight, and I particularly like the stories and the way they're presented, so thank you.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Vento. So the answer to your question is unfortunately a little complicated. We don't actually have the demographics specifically of our participants. We administered a survey to participants, but we didn't get a response from all of them. So what we did do is we're inferring demographics from the identity groups that these were focused around. So if we had a focus group that was primarily focused around Hispanic and Latino residents, for example, the demographics are based on the group. And so we did have focus groups that were based around identities of youth, as well as identities of senior citizens as well. And so we can try to include those as well, but it's not going to correlate specific directly to age. But I think we'll get at answering the question. I think we'll get at answering the question you're asking.
Well, and Madam Chair, if I could, we in some respect have gotten the youth feedback from the presentations that were given earlier this summer by the young people. Yeah. They really delivered some pretty poignant messages about being able to bike and walk and have transportation access. So thank you.
Additional questions, comments? Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you for this transportation needs assessment information. And I'm curious about how the findings intersect with how we how we implement our transit demand policy criteria. Can you speak to that at all, or what the plans are for using this information?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, I don't think I can speak to that directly. Certainly the findings that we have are meant to be shared across the council, and we hope that they'll be broadly integrated. I can't speak to those criteria themselves. Charles, do you have the ability to speak more directly?
Yeah, Councilmember, could you say again which criteria? or
Yeah, the transit demand criteria, from some of the testimonies of individuals and saying that the way that we look at transit needs as transit dependent, for example, where folks don't have a car or they have to use somebody else's car to get around. I didn't see an example of where people would actually get stranded, which can happen if you don't have reverse commutes, especially in some of the suburban areas or the rural areas. So I'm just wondering, and I've said this often, how does that impact our transit demand policy and criteria? And Mr. Carlson, I don't know if you want to answer that, but I know that, we're looking at geographic transportation needs. And so that's kind of what I'm getting to.
Yeah, Madam Chair, council members, certainly it influences this work, helps understand a lot of the story behind that doesn't show up in the quantitative data of where people are going and when. I think the idea is that it does influence service design down the road as we incorporate this in the TPP, that we're aware of the broader set of needs behind the numbers when determining the appropriate type of transit for an area, whether it's fixed route service, on-demand service, dial ride service, et cetera, that we know both the quantitative numbers that come from Jonathan's groups in terms of our onboard survey and our travel behavior inventory type analyses, but also the needs that may not be reflected in those types of evaluations, so that we can then translate into the policy plan. As Jonathan noted, certainly this was not the only source where transportation safety and security has emerged as the key topic. How we translate that into travel across modes is something we're grappling with specifically in the transportation policy plan, and then would continue to advance that in different programs.
Oh,
I would say, this has been presented to the TPP work group, and the work group, again, is a mix of TAB members and council members. And then we've also had the information to that group that's gone out to the counties, the information from some of our youth leaders. And so we're taking all these pieces and trying to put it together to try and figure out what the overall priority should be for the region related to transportation. So this is one piece of it all. But to what Charles said, safety, whether it is bike, walking, cars, transit, from all perspectives, that safety and well-being by far has probably, I think, is the thread that's come through everything that we've had presented, and even the discussions among the work group, I would say. So, yeah.
Madam Chair, as well, I think that this work highlights, and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to be used, so I don't want to make commitments, but I think that this work, as well as the youth leadership work that you heard earlier this summer, really have both, because of the need to the focus on. Because of both the equity focus as well as the need to be broad across the region, has really, I think, shines a light on transportation and security in suburban areas, and the gaps that are created there where transit is not as effective, and really does create a call for solutions that will address that. I can't say what those are going to be. I can't, in my position, say what those are going to be, but I think that this research really points to that as a need.
Councilmember Chambliss?
Yeah, thanks. And the last thing that you said, Dr. Carlson, about advancing the TPT into not just policy, but into programs. I'm curious to see, how long it takes to advance down to the program level, because a lot of times when we identify additional needs and put them into our TPP, we have to go into stages before they get into official programs. Maybe it'll be a pilot or, microtransit or something like that, but this information is very useful for the TPP and also how it'll translate into the program specifically.
Councilmember Pacheco?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to see a little more information on a family response. And I'll tell you, I came from a household that I have 3 brothers, 3 sisters, mother and father, but no one drove a car. And so we were dependent pretty much on the bus, or later on when I would drive, I'd pick my mom up at work. And it's because if she worked second or third shift is when I had come in like the middle of the night, and then, then I'm driving crazy. But, yeah, I would go drive real fast, and she was like, and I said, Mom, you never drove a car. How do you know that works? It was the wrong brake. But when I hear the questions, and I heard this often when I spent some time at the legislature testifying on behalf of driver's license for all. And they were talking about it more as a privilege, and some as a right, but a privilege for an individual to get back and forth to work. And I testified then and said that it's more than an individual's right, and not, actually I don't think it's right, it's a privilege in which you have to pass the test and you have to do everything else to get a license to drive, but it also impacts the whole family because now you have to drive somebody. And it's not just work, it's going to the volleyball game, it's going to be involved in your children's activities, it's having your children understand that, like my daughter took a bus this morning after I kicked her out, that she's running late. She's over De La Salle, but it's one bus, and the little one gets a little bit more nervous about it. But you look at over 40% of the Latino population is under 21, and it's maybe under 17. And so it's, how do you educate people on the use of the bus and why it's important, and what is the message we're sending at schools? And I'd like to hear more response, what people are thinking as a more of a family kind of role there, not just going to work and back, because we seem to be stuck on that.
I think that's a great point. And one of the things I like most about this work is you guys covered a lot of geography. From my district, it's Shakopee, Waconia, Chaska. Waconia is always out there, and if you live, if you catch the bus out there, you might have to take the bus for 10 miles, maybe more, and to get to school, you miss that bus, your car breaks down, or, now you can't go to school, or you've got issues of getting to healthcare or so, it's like what I like about this is it captured sort of the needs, for the example you're citing, versus the guy who's a farmer outside of Waconia has to get in town to get his groceries. Those are all real people stories, and that's what I like about how we're approaching the TPP a little differently this time, where I feel very intentionally it's more people focused, which I think is really important and a difference in how we've done it in the past. So, other questions, comments? All of them are good comments. So, it's interesting work. All right, if there's nothing else, thank you. And if there's nothing else this evening, all right, we can be adjourned. All right, that was good comment.